Good afternoon. Welcome to the November 16, 2015 Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Commission regular scheduled meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Sasatrian?
Present.
Quad?
Here.
Kafayan?
Yes.
Michaels?
Here.
President Wu?
Present.
Okay, the agenda for the November 16, 2015 regular meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall on or before Friday, November 13, 2015. Item 2 is upcoming council agenda items.
Yes, President Wu, members of the Commission, on November 17th, tomorrow night, we do have a joint report with the Public Works Department. And that is a motion to approve advertising for bids for the Dugmajan Barn Mechanical Systems Improvement Project, which is the next phase towards the development of an educational center at the Dugmajan Barn. The estimate for this work is $500,000. Then on December 8th, we have a motion for the council to review and approve the Development Impact Fee Strategic Plan, and a second action item, which is a motion to review and approve the Fremont Park Master Plan. Those are both on December 8th, and as of now, that's all we have on the docket, Mr. Chair, or President.
Item 3, Commission staff comments.
Any comments?
No comments.
Commissioners?
President Wu, if no one has any comments, I actually would like to go through the list of upcoming events in our department.
Please do.
On Monday, November 16th, that's today, from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m., the California High-Speed Rail Authority is having a community open house meeting at the Adult Recreation Center. On Thursday, November 19th at 4 p.m., we're having a teen billiards tournament at Pacific Community Center. Also on the 19th, from 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m., Club Maple is having their Thanksgiving party at Maple Park Community Center. On Thursday through Saturday, November 19th through 21st at 7 p.m., Free Shakespeare in the Park, Love's Labor's Lost. That's by the Dean Productions Theater Company, and that will take place at Brand Park. On Friday, November 20th, 5:30 p.m. to 10 p.m., we're having a teen night out at Pacific Community Center. Thursday and Friday, November 26th and 27th, city offices are closed for Thanksgiving holiday. Wednesday, December 2nd, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., we're having the holiday tree lighting ceremony at Perkins Plaza. Friday, December 5th, 5:30 p.m. to 10 p.m., we have a teen night out at Pacific Community Center. On Saturday, December 15th, 6 p.m., is the Montrose Christmas Parade. And on Friday, December 18th, from 5:30 p.m. to 10 p.m., is another teen night out at Pacific Community Center. For more information, the public can call 818-548-2000 or visit www.glendaleca.gov/parks. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is item 4, oral communications. I don't have any cards. Item 5, consent items. At A is approval of the minutes of the Commission regular meeting held on October 19, 2015.
You have a motion?
I have a motion to move it.
I'll second.
I apologize. Who did the second? Oh, Michaels. Thank you very much. Commissioner Sasatrian?
Yes.
Abstain?
Yeah.
Fuad? Thank you. Kafayan?
Yes.
Michaels?
Yes.
And President Wu?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next is item 6, action items. At A, Development Impact Fee Strategic Plan. At 1 is a motion to review and provide feedback on the results of the Development Impact Fee DIF Community Outreach Program, potential options, and staff recommendations for development of a Development Impact Fee Strategic Plan.
Yes, Mr. President, before I begin, I do want to inform you there is another commission meeting. I think it's a Civil Service Commission meeting? Or the
Commission on the Status of Women.
Commission on the Status of Women, which starts at 5 o'clock. So we're going to try to be out of here by 4:30. We have 3 action items. They all warrant substantial or could warrant substantial discussion. So if by around 4 o'clock we have not progressed to item 6C, which is the suspension policy, then we might be best served holding that over until a December meeting, and then we would propose to change our meeting date from
December 21st to December 14th.
Yeah, in order to take care of that agenda item. Agenda item 6A, in September, you might recall that we reported that we were embarking on a community outreach program for the development of a development impact fee strategic plan, and we got good feedback from the Commission on ways to actually improve our community outreach strategy at that time. And so what the development impact fee strategic plan is about is we do charge developers a fee as part of their permit approvals in order to increase or add parks and recreational facilities to accommodate the growing population or the new residents to the city of Glendale. Prior to this current year, that revenue would average about $1 to $2 million a year. So there wasn't that big of a need to develop a well thought through strategy on how we would be appropriating those funds. So what we would do is on an annual basis, we would determine what our highest park needs were or which existing projects needed an infusion of additional funds where there might be a budget gap, or we use those funds to propose to City Council to complete projects that had already been started and for which there were no other available funding sources. So on a year-to-year, case-by-case, project-by-project basis, we would appropriate the development impact fee funds. Now we find ourselves in a situation where, with all of the recent development all at one time in our community, that we have a sudden infusion of $16 million. By the end of this current fiscal year, we will have $6 million unappropriated to spend towards park projects. And there are funding parameters or requirements for the use of the development impact fee funds, which Ms. Alexanian will explain further. And based on these parameters, based on all of the feedback that we have received from the community, and then staff's analysis of that feedback and those funding parameters, and based on our own knowledge of what the highest needs are for our parks and recreational facilities, we have developed recommendations for a proposed strategic plan for the use of the development impact fee funds, which we are submitting to the Commission for your review and feedback, which will be followed by a report to the City Council for City Council's review and approval. What staff did is we broke out the recommendations into Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 representing projects that can be planned and developed and implemented now or in the very near future. And Tier 2 projects which would take longer to plan and longer to develop and probably require a further accumulation of development and impact fee funds. So we will be presenting that plan to you in just a few minutes. So we are asking for you.
Mr. Duran, I have a quick question. Is this $16 million just a one-time shot, or what do we envision in ensuing years?
Yes. It is a one-time shot. After July of 2016, we anticipate that we will be back down to levels of $1 to $2 million a year. But right now, the unappropriated fund balance is $16 million that we have to appropriate to projects. And by definition of a strategic plan, you will note that we are not identifying, in most cases, specific projects, but mainly types of projects for which we recommend the use of the development impact fee funds. And then we project, when we make our report to the City Council, that we will begin to identify specific projects or specific park sites for some of our recommendations. We do plan, as I mentioned earlier, we do plan to go to the City Council on December 8th for their review and approval of the strategic plan. And of course, part of that report, we will include the feedback and the comments from the the commission for the city council's further consideration. So with that, Mr. President, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Teresa Alexanian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duran. Good afternoon, President Wu, members of the commission. As Jess laid out, I'd like to go into a little bit more detail on what the development impact fees can be used for. So development impact fees consist of QIMBY fees and mitigation fees. QIMBY fees are when there's a subdivision of land. So if a developer is subdividing land to build on, and they pay development impact fees, they'd be paying QIMBY fees, and those fees can be used to replace or repair amenities or apparatus or maintenance of our facilities. Mitigation fees are paid on all other developments, new developments. So if there is no subdivision of land, then the developer would pay mitigation fees. What we're talking about today, the estimate is mitigation fees, and with mitigation fees, the fees can be used for development of new parks, new or expanded recreation opportunities, or new features in existing parks. So where QIMBY fees could have been used for repairs, mitigation fees are just for new parks or new features within existing parks. And of course, generally there should be a geographic nexus to the area where the residential and commercial development is taking place. Or if it's not in the general area of the development, there should be a regional draw. So those are just some of the parameters that we also laid out for the public when we held a community meeting. So as just mentioned, staff and council determined it would be important to hold community meetings to get further feedback from the community on where their needs were and where their priorities were. We held 3 meetings, and the meeting locations were strategically selected to be in South and Central Glendale. The meetings were held on September 14th. The first meeting was on September 14th at the Adult Recreation Center, and it was an evening meeting. The second meeting was on a Saturday on September 26th in the morning, 10 a.m. to 12 noon, and it was at Maple Community Center. And the third meeting was on October 3rd from 10 to 12 at Pacific Community Center. The first 2 meetings had about 25 people in attendance. The third meeting had about 85 people in attendance. The outreach that we did to notify the public, the flyers that were created and per recommendation from this commission were translated to Armenian and Korean as well, were sent out through a mailing list, email blasts, department and city newsletters, social media, so it was on our Facebook and Twitter, through websites. It was on the city's website, the departments and the cities, through press releases. There were newspaper articles in the Glendale News Press. We also put it in the calendar section of the news press. GTV6 was running an announcement on our local Channel 6. And the flyers were also distributed at community centers. So when we mailed out and emailed out the flyers, we emailed them out to and mailed them out to 109 organizations, depending on whose email address we had versus a mailing address. And those organizations consisted of businesses and merchant associations, the various chambers of commerce organizations, cultural service, social service, and athletic organizations, hospitals, homeowners associations, department commissioners and committees, various foundations, Glendale Unified School District board members, Armenian news stations, the Glendale Community College board members and key staff, community foundations, and youth organizations. So we emailed or mailed out the flyers to these organizations, and we also asked them to please share it with their clients, customers, neighbors, and friends. So it was our way of asking these organizations to please help spread the word. And of course, the flyer was also, like we said in the previous slide, it was on our website and at our public counters. We hired Catherine Padilla and Associate to help us facilitate the 3 meetings. The structure of the meetings were, we opened it up with a welcome from our director, Jess Duran, and then Sam Genoway of Catherine Padilla and Associates facilitated the meetings. The meeting format, and there was a PowerPoint attached to as an exhibit to the report. And so the PowerPoint that was in your report was the PowerPoint that we used as part of the presentation. And we briefed the community on the history of development impact fees, explained how the fees can and cannot be used, shared examples of projects that have been, currently are funded with DIF funds, discussed the city's park portfolio, breaking it down between the various types of parks, mini parks versus neighborhood parks versus community parks, or special regional parks versus special facilities, just to educate the public on what types of amenities are found in each of those parks and how many we have. And then we opened up the meeting for discussion. So we opened it up for the community to provide feedback on where they thought the needs were. And Catherine Padilla of Catherine Padilla and Associates helped us record the meeting on a large sheet of paper where the community, as they were sharing their ideas, could see that we were writing them down. All the feedback that we received was compiled into a report, which again is an exhibit to the report that we presented to you. And the feedback that we received was analyzed and consolidated, and we identified themes that we heard from the three various meetings. So the themes that we heard from the community were that they would like to see the city invest in citywide and regional assets. So projects like Duke Major Nature Education Center, Rockhaven, or Riverwalk. So projects that would have a regional draw. They would like to see the $16 million spent on projects like that. The second theme that we heard was to expand facilities for organized sports. So soccer fields, there's a youth soccer community was there, and we heard that there's a shortage of soccer fields and they'd like to see soccer fields. We also heard from the baseball community for baseball fields, and some of the examples of sites that they mentioned was Site A or a partnership through GUSD. There was also the pickleball community, so more pickleball courts because it's a growing sport and they'd like to see more in the community. Another theme we heard is to enhance existing parks and community centers. So to develop, for example, Central Park, which is near Adult Recreation Center, to rehabilitate Fremont Park, which actually there's a report coming up after this report on a master plan for that park. Shade structures, restrooms, fitness equipment, so to add amenities to existing parks. The other theme that we heard was to expand existing parks, so to acquire property to expand a park that already exists. And one example that we heard was Chess Park. There's property near that park currently that was vacant, and two properties that were vacant. So when somebody from the community was recommending that the city look into purchasing those properties to expand Chess Park, so that would be an example. Or purchasing a property near, let's say, Wilson Mini to convert it from a mini to a community or neighborhood park. So those would be examples of expanding a park. To create new parks or recreation facilities or opportunities, so to develop a new park in downtown, whether it's probably through a new acquisition, so to buy land to be able to build more parks, or to use existing land to develop new parks, such as a bike skills park. The other theme that we had identified, and it's also in the report, is the other things that we heard that weren't necessarily eligible for use for DIF or weren't necessarily ideas of new park development, but more feedback, like better maintenance of the parks or more programming in our parks, were then consolidated into a category which we refer to as other ideas and concerns. So based on all the feedback that we did receive from the community, the evaluating the eligibility requirements or parameters and the community input, staff is proposing some options for consideration for a DIF strategic plan. So those options would be, the first option that we have is to complete projects for which money has already been appropriated for. So Duke Major Nature Education Center, it's an existing project that's underway. There is funding currently appropriated to the project, but to allocate more funds as necessary to complete the project. Or Fremont Park, the master plan. So we're master planning it now to allocate funds from DIF to be able to complete that project. The second option is to add new amenities such as shade structures, outdoor fitness equipment, play structures, and restroom buildings to existing parks. Again, using some of the existing projects like Fremont or something that we also have in our CIP plan, the Verdugo Park North Improvement Project, using the funds to be able to complete those projects. Or as a new project, or a new project at an existing park. So use the funds to be able to, let's say, add the shade structures to an existing park. The other option, the next option is to add new soccer or multi-purpose fields. So to build more soccer fields or baseball or multi-purpose fields, which could be used for both baseball or softball and soccer. And the various options under this would be either through a partnership with GUSD to develop Site A, which is north of the sports complex, which is an open site right now, add to an existing park such as Fremont Park. So as we're master planning Fremont Park, use the existing field to convert it to a soccer field through a new property acquisition. So purchase new property to be able to build a soccer field or a multi-purpose field, or to convert existing natural turf ball fields to artificial turf for dual purpose, which is similar to what we did at Pacific Park, where we just recently converted one of our fields to artificial turf. The next option is to add an active passive park in Central or South Glendale, and that would be master planning and developing Central Park with community input, new acquisition and development, or a partnership again through GUSD. So these are some options of, that we can consider under each of these options. The next one is to expand existing parks, so new acquisition and development of adjacent properties. So looking to see where we can acquire additional property to be able to expand an existing park. So these are some of the options for consideration as part of a DIF strategic plan. And evaluating again, the eligibility parameters, the community input, and the potential options that I just presented to you. Staff has recommendations for some projects and how we can allocate funds to those projects. Again, keeping in mind that these are more at a high level and not exact specific projects identified. So some of the so what staff is proposing is, as just mentioned, Tier 1 projects, which would be projects that would be in the 1 to 3 year phase. So these are projects that we can either begin or end in the next 3 years. And then Tier 2 projects, which are more long-term projects that would need additional funding. So we'd have to wait a few more years to accumulate more development impact fees. So some of the Tier 1 projects that staff is recommending based on the strategic plan identified is to spend $500,000, to allocate $500,000 to regional projects for which money has already been appropriated. So the Duke Major Nature Education Center, we anticipated would need an additional $500,000 to complete. So setting aside $500,000 from the $16 million that we're anticipating for that project. The second project that we've identified is new amenities at existing parks. And again, as I mentioned earlier, some of those amenities could be new playgrounds, shade structures, multi-use courts, outdoor fitness equipment, restrooms, and again, Fremont Park renovation. The next project would be, and we're recommending that we set aside $4.15 million for new amenities at existing parks. The next one is $2.5 million for soccer fields or multi-purpose fields, and an example of that would be a partnership with GUSD. Staff has preliminary met with GUSD, and there is interest for us to work together on a joint project. So looking at some of their fields and how we can convert them to joint use projects and be able to use it during the day when the school's in session, and then when school's out, opening it up to the public. And that's setting aside $2.5 million for that project. The next recommendation is to add an active park in Central Glendale, and that would be setting aside $2 million to master plan and develop Central Park. Right now, Central Park is a passive park. It really doesn't have very many features. And so Staff is recommending to set aside $2 million to be able to master plan and develop that park, of course, again, with community input. So the Tier 1 projects would add up to $9.15 million. Now, the staff is recommending to basically save the $6.8 million or to set it aside for more long-term projects, and as we accumulate more money to be able to allocate funds to Tier 2 projects. So looking at Tier 2 projects, again, these are more long-term projects, is to add another soccer field or a multi-purpose field at Site A. Site A it's not a project that we'll be able to start and finish in the next 3 years, so we could start the feasibility study of converting Site A to, or adding soccer fields to Site A, developing it into a sports facility, and so we're recommending setting aside $5 million for that project. Setting aside $50,000 for new amenities at existing parks, and so looking at potentially a bike skills park at an existing facility, maybe somewhere in our open space. And then setting aside $5 million for expanding existing parks, and that would be for acquisition and development of new parks. So we would look to see where we could buy property, where we could build a new park or some sort of a sports facility. We realize that obviously we only have $16 million, and as you could tell, the total altogether is going to be $19 million, which is why we say that Tier 2 would be the second phase. You can look at it that way, where we would need to accumulate more development impact fees in the $1 to $2 million per year range to be able to allocate additional funds to be able to complete the projects. And again, these are just a starting base, so these projects could potentially cost more money, but setting the money aside now or keeping that in mind that this would be the project plan going forth. This concludes my report. Should Commission have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions, Commissioners? Comments?
Well, do the staff recommendations obviously reflect the results of your community meetings?
Correct. The staff recommendations are based on what we heard and the options for consideration as part of a strategic plan.
And is part of the purpose of today's meeting to go through each of the categories and give our comments?
You can go through each category and give your comments, or if you have general comments you'd like to give, however Commission would like to provide your feedback on the options presented.
I mean, I personally have some questions and comments on several of the categories, but I don't know how you folks want to proceed. Should we just get into it, or?
I would.
What do you?
Do you have any scars on this, or speakers on this one?
We do have a speaker card. So should we take the speaker card first and then have the Commissioners comment?
Yes, President Wu, you can call out their name.
We'll do. We have one speaker card for item 6A, Mr. Stephen Meek.
Only me? Wow.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I wish you could do all of them, but it seems like a lot to do. I would love for you to work with Glendale Unified School District, although I have personally some doubts since we were supposed to get tennis courts after they closed the ones at Central Park, and nothing has happened in that 8 years or so. So I'm hoping that we can push the Glendale Unified School District to open up some of those tennis courts to the public. That would also, if that happened, allow the pickleball people to get some more pickleball courts within the city. As far as the Central Park, I think it's a great opportunity. We've got the Neon Art Museum. We've got the library being redone. We've got a new adult recreation center. It'd be a great place to put in not only active and passive, but some more artwork, public artwork. I would like to see that sort of thing. As a just personal thing, if we could use drought-tolerant things, plantings, add some milkweed to help the butterfly population within the thing. And I am all for doing the chess park. If we could get the chess park and the buildings next to it, that to me is the last open space in downtown Glendale. And it's our, once it's built, we can't do it anymore. So if we could do something there, that would be wonderful. I know it's going to cost some money because of that land, but I think it would be a good thing to look into, at least, even if we can't do it, check into it and see if we could. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that when you're doing your outreach to other places, maybe do a blast to nextdoor.com, which seems to be taking off in a number of the neighborhoods that I'm used to and connected with. If we could publicize this sort of meeting and the other meetings on there as well, that would be helpful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. So at this time, should we go and open it up to the commissioners, see if there's any comments?
Well, on the Duke Major Nature Education Center, I mean, this is maybe my personal thought. Educational centers, it's a building with displays? And what does it consist of? And is it funded already, or is this just sort of jump-started?
Yes, President Wu, Commissioner Fowd. That project has a current $2.5 million appropriation, and it's all DIF funds. This was one of those projects where we had been recommending 2 or 3 successive appropriations to the City Council in 2 or 3 successive years, which would allow us to finally complete that project as it was envisioned about 15 years ago with the original Duke Major acquisition and improvement project. Yes, it will be a nature educational center. It will be it will have displays. It will have different nodes with different educational visual displays talking about the history of the area, the history of the barn, and some interpretive programming as it relates to the Wilderness Park. The project that we are going to City Council with tomorrow is to pay for the mechanical systems, the HVAC system, the plumbing, the rough plumbing, and the rough electrical work and flooring. Right now, it's just a shell with the dirt floor. And then once that is completed, we are also in the process of issuing a request for proposal for an interior design consultant that will design the interior improvements. And there will be a consultant with experience in designing interpretive centers or educational centers. So the ultimate goal is to be able to open it up as that community amenity, and also to be able to rent it out for special events, special lectures, receptions at the barn. So we currently have $2.5 million appropriated. We have to add a new restroom building to the park in order to accommodate this project per the building codes. And so we are proposing to use an additional $500,000 in development impact fee funds of the $16 million. So $2.5 million is already appropriated, so it's not part of the 16, but we feel we need another $500,000 that would be part of the $16 million.
And what would happen if this money wasn't appropriated this year? What would be the result?
We would either have to scale down the plans and the vision for the interior improvements, or keep the plan as envisioned and hope to submit another or make another recommendation as part of the 16-17 or 17-18 annual capital improvement program.
Do other commissioners have a view on this? I mean, I'm not a big, I guess this project has obviously been approved by many city councils and it's gone through many, so that ship has sailed.
That has already been appropriated. So.
Right. I guess my only thought is this is sort of found money, if you will, so we need to do something fairly exciting, I think, with it that we otherwise wouldn't be doing. And this seems a little bit more mundane. Maybe I'm mistaken, but if it's necessary, I don't know. It is what it is, I guess.
I will agree with you that the $16 million presents a very unique opportunity to do something really significant.
Is the staff able to identify some of the projects that would be proceeding normally under normal funding versus identifying the projects that are included with the larger influx of impact fee money? For example, would Duke Major follow a schedule without the $16 million if funding was kept $1 to $2 million a year, and identify the projects that the Commission could comment on as a special use for this unique funding source?
President Wu, Commissioner Michaels, we would probably be recommending the additional funding towards the Fremont Park renovation project. So we'd probably be recommending the $2 million, whether we had the $16 million a windfall or not. We would probably be recommending the $500,000 to finally complete the barn project. And beyond that, I'm not sure what we might be doing. We might be recommending the multi-use courts to be able to use either existing or new basketball courts or tennis courts for shared use with pickleball, for example. That would be an efficient recommendation to be able to make if we were limited in DIF funds. Beyond that, we'd probably see if we could recommend a new playground or playground replacement as part of the DIF. But beyond that, we probably wouldn't be thinking of all of these other recommendations that are part of the strategic plan because the funding simply wouldn't be enough. So it is a golden opportunity.
Again, just to clarify what Commissioner Michaels said, you were asking about how this works in conjunction with our normal capital outlay budget?
If this is being passed on to the City Council, my comment would be to provide more clarification of how this $16 million is unique and which projects are being considered out of it versus out of what the normal $1 to $2 million budget would be. Where right now Tier 1 and Tier 2, Duke-Magian is included with the other funding for some of the more ambitious projects, of just being able to pass along and have council have a better understanding of what is part of the original plan and what is more ambitious with this unique opportunity with the development downtown.
Or put another way, what is the department's normal capital outlay budget?
In a normal year since the recession, the department would receive anywhere between $300,000 to $500,000 or $600,000 in capital improvement funds, and as I mentioned earlier, between $1 to $2 million in DIF funds, and then maybe $300,000 or $400,000 in community development block grant funds. But of the city's general fund capital improvement program, $200,000 of it goes to a project called unanticipated projects, which are major emergency repairs or improvements that we have to make to the parks throughout the year that we don't know ahead of time. $30,000 of that goes to maintain Rock Haven, for example, just to do bare a minimum maintenance of Rock Haven. And then that only leaves a couple of $100,000 left to fill gaps, typically projects already underway. So there's been very little opportunity for any new projects in the last couple of years, and again, especially since the recession. So that's why when we do our planning for our capital improvement projects, it's really year to year. And it's based on the funding that we anticipate will be available. So if we do not anticipate much funding available, then we wouldn't take so much time to try to develop a strategic plan for projects because we know that the money is not there. So that's why this is different even for us.
Yes, please.
I have a couple of comments and recommendations. I wanted to first commend the staff on the community outreach meetings. I had the opportunity with some of our fellow commissioners to attend the last one, and I think the format and the way the community had an opportunity to actually present their ideas was very well thought out. In regards to the Duke-Magian Education Center, I think we've always talked about how we have a lack of green space in our city, and this really is a unique opportunity for us to potentially have additional. And my recommendation would be to either cut this $500,000 down and allocate that to either multi-use courts or new playgrounds. One of the items that were listed as something that was recommended from community members that I don't see in the Tier 1 is the developing new programs. Where do you see that fitting into the recommendations that you guys have made?
Yes, Commissioners, these funds can only be used for capital improvement projects. Unfortunately, we can't use these funds for programming.
So
it has to be brick and mortar projects.
Okay. And then my specific comment on the chess park, are those things that we're going to be deciding later at a future meeting, or is this something that's going to be passed on to City Council now, and then they're going to make the decisions there? The
latter. The next step is that we will make a similar report to the City Council on December 8th. We will have our staff recommended strategic plan. We will relay to the City Council comments from the Commission for their consideration. And on the 8th, our expectation is that the City Council will decide on approving the strategic plan, probably identifying specific projects under the proposed categories, and potentially modifying the amounts from those that are being recommended by staff. And then the expectation is that will become the proposed strategy for the use of the $16 million in development impact fee funds. I'm not sure if there will be an opportunity to present those findings to either back to the community or to this commission.
Thank you.
I am for immediate improvement. That's fine. We have to spend the money on those. But do we have a committee or department that will look forward and see the activities in the planning department, what's going on a certain area, downtown Glendale in this case, and acquire lands before we get into this situation? Is there such a group that are interested to see the future where we are, to develop parks and extra for the houses that are developed?
Commissioner Calfine, no, to my knowledge, there is not that type of a visioning unit in the city of Glendale. Again, having this influx of money is something very different and very new to us. We may have had some of that, and we may have been able to work with redevelopment staff, for example, if we still had redevelopment, because they did visioning of the downtown area. But currently, there's not such a unit in the city, so we have to depend on ourselves or ask for assistance on a project-by-project basis.
Legally, how much of this money we can keep it on the site to acquire new?
Theoretically, if you and or the city council directed a staff to look for a multi-acre site someplace in town where we could use the full $16 million to add brand new park area and do the acquisition and relocate the families and then master plan the park and ready the property and clear it and pay for the improvements. All this money could go towards one project if that was the direction from the city council. So they have to decide between one or two major projects or some of a number of things to fill a number of priorities in the city and to use this opportunity to try to address a number of priorities. So that's what the city council is going to have to decide. You may recall a couple of months ago, it looked like there might have been an opportunity to at least consider
Sears.
Well, I was thinking of the school, the GUSD headquarter property. That would have qualified as a downtown park site that would have been eligible for these funds if that project were able to materialize. But that's an example of what would be possible to do with this funding.
So what would be our recommendation to keep on the side some money from this $16 million?
Well, right now, staff's recommendation under Tier 2 is to keep $10 million set aside for future projects. So that means that would include $7 million of what is already anticipated to come in, plus programming a future year's money. So let's say we get $2 million every year for the next 3 years. So this would include $7 million that we anticipate now, plus another $6 million after the next 3 years. That would give us a $13 million project, a $13 million budget to do something in the way of a new park.
Who will be looking for this vision or the project?
It would have to be our staff.
Our staff, not the city council.
Well, the city council would approve it and direct staff to go and probably hire a consultant and work in partnership with other departments like the Community Development Department and try to find a site and cost it out, determine the feasibility, everything that it would take, then go back to the city council with a proposal on an acquisition project. Another way of creating increased park space in southern or central Glendale would be acquisition of properties adjacent to existing parks. That might be a more economic way to go. You're not buying as much property at one time, but you are actually increasing the amount of park space in southern or central Glendale.
Where are the exact limits of these properties? It's downtown Glendale. Which parts mainly?
Yeah, Commissioner, that's the thing. It isn't exact. All the guidelines say is that there should be some nexus between the area or the part of town where the development is taking place, the projects from which you're collecting the fees, to where you put these parks and recreational facilities.
What's the closest
but there's
park
no boundaries.
What's the closest park to the downtown area aside from the Chess Park? Is there anything like immediately west of downtown?
It would be Central Park at the Central Library.
And what about on the west side? Is there anything west of Central?
West of Central would be Fremont, Pacific.
But close to downtown, like around California, Wilson, those streets, nothing, I don't think.
No.
How about San
neighborhood
Fernando?
parks.
On San Fernando? South Glendale.
I mean, I personally would like to use some of the land money for land acquisition in a sensible way. I'm not sure I'm personally in favor of the Chess Park expansion because that sort of breaks up the commercial strip on Brand. I think it's more of a retail street than all of a sudden you have a park, although it would be nice. But I think a park for the new apartments, condos, would be useful. And, west of Central strikes me as one location because this is one in a lifetime, and acquisition of land is so, you're never going to do it otherwise. So if it's a multi-year accumulation of funds, and part of which would be these, I would be in favor of that
I agree
over a
with
couple
you.
of other things.
Would it be fair to say that as a Tier 2 project, the feedback or the interest on the part of the Commission is rather than what staff is recommending, that the City Council consider instead using those funds and accumulating future years' funds for an actual land acquisition project in or near central Glendale as a project?
That would be
That would be
Yeah.
10 million, right? That's the 10
and
million.
it can be a mini park, then you go from there if that's all it is.
It would be 10 million plus future years increments, so after 3 years it could grow to about $16-17 million.
I think we should look ahead and do something unique and different than a mini park. It's a
fair
one-time
enough.
opportunity. We have to be proud of it.
I don't know if these developers can be asked to dedicate any property as part of a park, but have creative solutions maybe is something.
Following those thoughts, I would like to see a line item in the budget structure to provide funding to continue the master planning, both for the acquisition of and development or acquisition of new property, such as expanding the chess park or finding another park near the apartments, as well as development of existing parks that may not have amenities such as Central Park or Rockhaven, areas where the city owns the property but it's not being utilized. If there is funding set aside to have staff time to figure out how to do that, I think that would be a lasting benefit of the impact fees to provide something into the future beyond the 3-year time frame that people are thinking of. But I believe with the influx of funds, land acquisition or development of new facilities, this is a very unique opportunity where if we wait, funding would be decades behind as far as generating sufficient funding to go ahead and acquire any substantial amount of property.
If we had the funds, we had the opportunity to buy things on land developing on Central. But since we didn't have the land, for the funds, we couldn't. So for the future, I would recommend that we have funds, and when we have the opportunity, we jump for it.
President Wu, members of the commission, I'd just like to add that the only limitation that we do have is that the funds need to be allocated towards a project within 5 years of receipt. So it's just identifying within 5 years of receipt that the funds are going to go to a specific project. So that's the only limitation as far as holding on to the funds. So it's 5 years.
5 years is pretty good, long time.
From receipt. Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of other comments on the projects.
Please.
On the GUSD sharing, what would these would be existing school sites where the fields would be remade and redone so the neighborhood could access them, and what would GUSD's contribution be towards that? Are they going to pay any money as envisioned, or would they just open up the field and say, you city, improve it? Or to be determined?
Yes, President Wood, Commissioner Fowd, the idea here is to work with the school district in a partnership where we would use their existing playgrounds and make improvements to the playgrounds and convert them to multi-use recreational space. For example, take a large asphalt playground, convert it to either half of it, 3/4, or all of it to artificial turf. So we don't have to acquire property. It's property already owned by the school district. They get to benefit from the improvements Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. Then at 4, it's opened up to the community, and it gives us an opportunity to program those fields for soccer leagues or baseball, depending on how it's improved, and or a multi-use court. Maybe a pickleball court part-time and a basketball court the rest of the time. But the idea is to take land that's already owned by the school district, so we don't have to spend money on acquisition. The city pays for the improvements, and so they provide the land, we provide the improvements, and then we share the recreational space.
Is this $2.5 million based on anything, or just a number?
It's based on conceptual designs by the school district on ideas that they've had before. So,
have we done this before? Has Parks partnered with GUSD at any location?
Probably the biggest example is the Edison Pacific project, where we formed a partnership to develop the entire Edison School Pacific Park campus. I believe it was a $46 million project, of which the school district provided $26 million, the city $20 million. We acquired 26 properties, relocated 150 families. We got a brand new park out of it, a swimming pool. We got a shared soccer field, a shared library, and the school district got a brand new school. We got a community center out of it. And we did something similar at Cerritos, where we share the field there, adjacent to Cerritos Elementary School. So there are a couple of models. It can work.
Can we ask the staff for next time to bring us examples of high schools or the school system where we can use after school, how much time we can spend for recreation purposes for the public?
Yeah, it would probably have to be elementary school. I think it would be difficult to share the high school baseball fields or football fields, for example. But we can...
Tennis courts, do they have tennis courts?
Yes. Someone alluded to a tennis court project which has taken forever to develop, but we still have a budget, we still have a plan, we still have a draft agreement to work with the school district to rehabilitate 6 tennis courts at Glendale High School, which will be shared tennis courts between the city of Glendale and the Glendale Unified School District. And that's an outgrowth out of the environmental mitigation for the Adult Recreation Center development, which was several years ago now. So we're still working on that project. We still intend to get those tennis courts completed and rehabbed and available to the community. We run into some snags, including the death of the designer and the architect, and they formed a new firm, and that firm unraveled. So it's been those kinds of things, among other things, as to why that project's taken so long. And then there's been turnover at the school district. So we can come back with some conceptual plans on how that might work. I think that's a good idea, and give a report to the commission.
So do we need approval on this, or we have to modify it?
I've taken some notes on your feedback. It sounds to me like the commission is comfortable with, or somewhat comfortable with the proposed plan, with one modification or exception or recommendation that they would like the city council to consider, and that is to maybe under tier 2, rather than planning on the $10 million for either Site A or expanding an existing park, to maybe look at setting that aside and direct staff to pursue land acquisition, to acquire property for a new park that would serve Central Glendale, and that would be the commission's feedback in terms of an improved strategic plan.
Well, again, what is the relation between Tier 1 and Tier 2 again?
Tier 2 are projects that would take longer to plan and develop. So it's projects that we wouldn't be able to immediately implement like we would the Tier 1 projects.
But they definitely would be budgeted.
Yes. If the city council were to approve the Tier 1 and Tier 2, the Tier 2 would become part of the strategic plan, and the funds would be earmarked for those projects.
And what about the $3 million, the $19 million? How do you do with the shortfall? That would be made up with development fees?
Future years increments, yes.
I just have one more question. On Central Park, is there a vision of what kind of park it's going to be in general?
No, that would be part of the master planning exercise. Right now, it's a clean canvas. So you'll hear a presentation from the Fremont Park architect, and he will walk you through the master planning of that park. So I'll give you
of Central Park.
Yeah, of Central Park. But this will be a good example of what we would have to do for Central Park. It would require a lot of community participation, a lot of community input. Hopefully by the new residents moving into town, the families buying up all the condominiums that are being built, and we would get feedback from them as to what they feel they would like to see in their downtown Glendale neighborhood park in terms of a playground, one playground, 2 playgrounds, one for toddlers, one for school-age kids. To what extent do they want a walking path or a jogging path or outdoor physical fitness equipment or a basketball court or a little amphitheater? That would all be part of the community input in the master planning of that park. And then we would make a presentation to the City Council on that conceptual idea, and the City Council would approve it or embellish on it. And that would go into the master planning of Central Park.
Is it just me, or is Central Park seems a little bit further away from all the new development? Whereas a park sort of west of Central would be closer? Is that a fair statement? I mean, we have the land we have, but I'm just, Central, I guess if that's the only park available to residents, then they'll hike the 3 or 4 blocks to get there, but there could be closer locations, I guess.
Yeah, it's the closest thing we have to a downtown park. Yeah.
At this moment.
Yeah.
And are you comfortable with Duck Magian?
I'm not a big nature center person. To me, you enjoy the outdoors without putting a building around it, but that's already been approved, so that's not within the commission's. And if you're saying this would hold up things for years, is that if this wasn't allocated? What is the impact if we don't do it again? We're left with a dirt floor for that much longer?
We would have to scale down the interior improvements. We'd have to have a nature center that was a little bit more bare bones than we would like, or the restroom building would have to be very, very simple and a basic than what we can design.
You recommend keeping it in? Just
we do.
I mean, to me, it's only 500,000, so I guess I could live. I mean, this has been years in the making, so why derail it at the end? I guess that would be my view. Over, I wouldn't do it, but we are where we are. So
You had said previously it's already appropriated $2.5 million.
Correct.
Of the $2.5 million, how much of it has been spent? And
it's very little. It's maybe $5,000 or $10,000 just on preliminary design and analysis.
so of the 2.5 that's already been appropriated, we've only spent $10,000 to $20,000, but you're recommending adding an additional $500,000 to that. So I just wanted to kind of get my 2 cents worth in here as well. I echo the comments and recommendation of my fellow commissioners, and I think this is imperative that we take a great opportunity and maximizing the funds that we have coming in. And I think that this, like you said, this is not an opportunity that happens on a frequent basis. So I think if we are able to acquire and to put together a new park that's going to be serving the central and southern Glendale part of the city, I think that's something that we definitely need to explore all our options and focus on and making that a possibility. Then I understand that we definitely need to make the capital improvements and also the maintaining of the current equipments and adding on and enhancing it. But I think in the long haul, I think that will serve the community and the city in the future. So I would be echoing the comments and recommendation of the commissioner. So I would like to see if there's a way we could modify or edit the recommendation to the city council to have it more words geared towards acquisition of new property in turn of converting that into a park. So if that could be something that we could entertain at this present time, what can we do at this point?
We will propose 2 options for Tier 2. One option as submitted by staff, and the second option as recommended by the commission. And that way the city council could look at both and then decide.
And I do have one more comment I wanted to make. Reviewing the report, I see that partnership with GGUSD is something that the community has voiced, and I think the commission also shares in that sentiment. So how have we been able to convey to GUSD that we need to partner up, and what kind of incentive can we give GUSD where they will be willing to partner up with us and see the benefit to them, where they see that, hey, you know what, partnering up with CSP does serve a purpose, such as the example you just mentioned about the Pacific Park and the Edison. So I think that if we could get somehow a buy-in from GUSD, maybe even having a rep come and just say, you know what, these are my thoughts or the thoughts of the district, and how can we incorporate that with the CSP's plans and future allocations, what have you. I think that would serve both entities. So if we could get somebody from GUSD to partake in maybe our upcoming meetings and just to kind of share with us their thoughts and their vision, I think that would go a long way as well.
President Wu, subject to the City Council's review and approval of the strategic plan, and if the Council approves the partnership with GUSD, we can have a follow-up meeting with our GUSD counterparts, and we can ask them to come and present some initial conceptual ideas to the Commission, in addition to a commitment from their end that they're totally on board with this partnership, and that they will be committed to sharing the same mission and objectives as the City of Glendale. We have to remember their kids are our kids, and so we have to be on board.
Look, can I move it this way? So I move the motion, the staff recommendation for development of a DIF strategic plan, except the Tier 2, which will be hold for a future development.
Okay, for the future development of a new park.
New park.
Acquisition and development of a new
Unique park.
Okay. That's good.
Okay.
All right, second.
Commissioner Sasatrian? Quad?
Yes.
Alfayan?
Yes.
Michaels?
Yes.
President Wu?
Yes. Thank you. Next item, please.
Sure. Next item is 6B, Fremont Park Master Plan. At 1 is a motion to review and approve the Fremont Park Master Plan and recommend the plan to the City Council for final approval.
Thank you. I have 6 speaker cards for this item.
I'm sorry, I have a 7th that I'll give you in a second.
Okay, so we'll start with the speakers. So the first speaker will be...
President, we'd like to give an overview of the project. We have a
my
staff
apologies.
report. There's been some mention of Fremont Park already as part of our DIF discussion. Fremont Park is a very heavy used neighborhood park in the densely populated part of the city. Last year we completed the last phase of the Maple Park neighborhood project. We're out to bid on Palmer. In 2003 we completed the ambitious Pacific Park project, where we got a brand new park in the partnership with the school district. That park is still in relatively good shape. So we are now ready to focus all of our attention to our next major neighborhood park renovation project, which right now is our highest priority, and that is Fremont Park. In fiscal year 14-15, the City Council did appropriate $2 million in DIF funds towards the development of a master plan and the improvements for Fremont Park. So I'm going to turn it over to Teresa, who's going to turn it over to David Volz of David Volz Design, and explain to you exactly what we have come up with. We had excellent community participation as part of this project. We had 2 great meetings, or 3? 2? 2 meetings. We try to take to heart all of the input that we received and the final plan that we have come up with. We have a number of speakers, so the interest level on part of the community is very high, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Teresa now.
Thank you. Before you today is a report to review and approve the Fremont Master Plan. Fremont Park is located at 600 West Hahn Avenue, which is south of Glen Oaks Boulevard and west of Pacific Avenue. It's a 7.9 acre, almost 8 acre neighborhood park. It's a borderline community park based on its size. It is our oldest park in Glendale. It was acquired in 1922, and it was last updated in 1988. The current features at the park include 8 tennis courts, children's play equipment, a wading pool, a half-court basketball court, sand volleyball court, an open field, rose garden, and many extensive picnic areas clustered under park's mature trees. The park is currently heavily used, as just mentioned, both active and passive recreation. The picnic areas are always booked and not reserved, but they're always being used for birthday parties and family gatherings. The children's play area is heavily used all times of day. The wading pool is reserved in the summers for birthday parties and events. And the open field area is always being used as a makeshift soccer field. The City Council appropriated the funds for master planning Fremont Park in fiscal year 13-14. Staff issued an RFP in August of 2014 and hired DVD, David Volz Design, to help us master plan. We held 2 community meetings, and we noticed a community quarter-mile around the park and the 2 elementaries near the park, which were Keppel and Columbus. We also emailed interest groups and posted signs at the park, as well as announcing it at council meetings. The meetings were well attended, mostly by people living near the park. The first meeting was held on April 11th. It was a Saturday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the park. There were 50 people in attendance. The meeting began with a background and introductions of the park, and we discussed the planning process, the purpose of the meeting, the goals, the city's goals and vision for the park. And then we took a walking tour around the park so that the people in attendance can see all angles and corners of the park. And then we came back and we broke out into 5 groups, and they did tabletop exercises where they pretended to be landscape architects for a day and designed and master planned the park that they would like to, that they envisioned for this park. And then the groups presented their ideas to the rest of the group. So each group got up there and presented their master plan. There was also a questionnaire that was provided, which was also included as an exhibit in the commission report, where individuals were able to provide feedback in writing. DVD gathered all the feedback that were received and prepared 3 different master plans. The master plans were then shared at the second community meeting, which was held on Wednesday, May 27th from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at Pacific Community Center, and there was again about 50 people in attendance at the second meeting. David presented the 3 schematic plans and discussed each one in detail, and at the end of the meeting we opened it up and took feedback from the attendees, and by show of hands we asked for a vote to see which plan was most favored by the community in attendance. Schematic B was the plan that was most favored, and it's the plan that is being proposed to you for review and approval today, with minor revisions or changes based on the feedback received from the community and based on feedback that was received from the other 2 plans. So Plan A and C had some features that the community liked, and so some of that was also incorporated into the final plan that's being presented to you, along with feedback that we received from some of the other departments we met with, like the police department, to see how a drive path would help with safety and security. In preparing the master plan, and as we shared with the community at the meetings, the city's vision or goal for the park, number 1, was safety and security. So a drive path where we could allow our police department to drive through to be able to to be able to see what's going on in the parks, better lighting and strategic fencing in certain areas. Increased parking, so we knew parking was an issue and we wanted to be able to increase parking, to add new features like a potential soccer field, because we know that there is a need out there, and the open space was being used currently as a makeshift soccer field. Grouping buildings to better maximize green space, maintaining maintenance efficiency, and also drought-tolerant planting. The plan as presented is estimated to cost approximately $8.5 to $9 million. $2 million is already appropriated in development impact fees to this project, and as presented in the DIF strategic planning, staff is also recommending to appropriate an additional $2 million to this project, because of the $8.5 to $9 million, we're anticipating that there's going to be about $4 million worth of new features or amenities that's being added to the park. So DIF can be used for new features, and so would qualify for this park. DVD is here, so David Volz, I invite him to come up and go through a presentation of the new features for the master plan.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening and talk to all you folks. This has been a nice project in that we had lots of public input, and it's just great to get the neighbors out to help us think about what they want to do with their park. This is an existing park and an old park, the oldest park in town, and it's also very well used already. So, we do want to make some big changes in the park, but there's a lot of things that are already there that the folks told us that they like about the park and that they want to influence the design as we developed it. I'm sure you folks know where it is, but just to point that out, its address is Hahn Avenue, which is. So Hahn Avenue runs along the northern part of the park and into those tennis courts that are in the middle of the park, but it's actually surrounded by Killingworth on the south, and then Patterson on the east, and Graydale on the west side. Some of the features in the park. Well, I'll go to the side where I can see a little bit better. We did do a lot of outreach, and it was great having people come up. These are some of the folks in the middle there that have showed us what kinds of things that they wanted. We had a lot of immediate neighbors telling us some of the impacts that they have on their residences, parking, and those kinds of things. But overall, there definitely was a feeling that this is a great park, and they were willing to put up with some inconveniences being across the street. Here's the park as it sits today. Just some of the things I want to point out. If you look to the left, that's the west. We have this green belt that runs through from the west side, kind of towards those the tennis courts, which are the colored areas, and so they kind of run along Patterson Avenue. So that's maybe one of the nice features of the park is all these big mature trees that run across that area. The play area is I've been out there a lot. It's always being used, and lots of kids. What we heard from the community was that it was kind of close to the street, and there were some concerns about kids running into the street, and so maybe we could push that back, and so we did take that into consideration. As you move to the east side there along Patterson, that kind of dirt patch, that's where soccer is being played, and we just have so much soccer being played we can't keep the grass there. We've actually tried fencing it off and to try to regrow the grass and pushing them off from time to time. But that's the soccer field there. The shiny round circle just to the north of that's a little wading pool that's been existing there for a long time. Also a well-loved amenity, but not open at all times. Thanks. And then we have 8 tennis courts on site. There's a concessionaire that runs those courts. They do some big tournaments, and they need that many courts to attract those kind of tournaments. But they also run lessons and general play at all times of the day and in the evening, because as you know, but you probably know, we have some new lights there. In the middle of the park is the Rose Garden. It's in a little bit of a disarray. There's roses there, but they're not happy roses, and so that's this area in here, Rose Garden. Some of the things that we did want to take into consideration as we designed the park were these safety concerns that we have. The back area, back in here. This is the train building where there's a club that runs this train. If you haven't been there, it's fantastic. It's awesome. They have little trains, small scale trains that run around in a built environment, which is really cool. And so that building sits there, and then just north of that building is the city's maintenance garage, and those two buildings keep us from being able to traverse from this side of the park across the park onto Hahn Avenue through here. So we can't get security vehicles, police can't get back there and check. And so there's usually, if we're having problems in the park, we're usually seeing it in this back area here, there that's kind of hidden. And so we wanted to try to address that through our plan. So this is kind of the setting of how it looks today. What I'd like to do is show you some of the master plan that we're proposing for the park, and then maybe go through the various features. So as you can see, we kept kind of that green belt. This is our rendering of how we see the park envisioned to be changed. So as you see that green belt along Patterson, we start from the east side. From the west side. We've maintained that open picnic areas. We're looking at developing some of those picnic spaces into a little more accessible, so there's a couple more walkways and those kinds of things. But overall, we want to keep that kind of grass, big trees that are existing there, and that kind of feel. So run across the park. We want to open up the middle of the park and push the play area into the park. That's the tan pieces that are there in the middle. Those would be the play spaces. And then we're looking at a new community building. And with that, new parking, that if we could take the two buildings that I pointed out earlier, the garage and the train area, and take those out of where they're at, we could possibly put that community building there, spread the parking across there, and then reconnect the park, the northern area of the park, to Hahn from Graydale. So we would get that connection and allow security vehicles and those kinds of, and normal traffic to go across the back of the park, thereby taking some of the burden off of Patterson and the homes that are along the other sides of the park. In order to make this happen, in order to make that opening in the middle, we would have to rebuild 4 of those tennis courts, and that's the farthest north courts are pushed over from where their present position, and we would rebuild them closer to Hahn and closer to Kellingworth, up towards the north side of the park. And I'll show you how that lays out in a second. So I want to talk through the features that we're thinking about including in the master plan. There's a couple areas, major areas in the park that we want to leave alone and not touch. The E1 area, those are the 4 tennis courts that are existing. They're in nice shape. They're terraced at 2 courts at one elevation, 2 courts at another elevation. They've just recently been relit and repaved. They're in nice shape, and we would leave those as they are. Also in the northern area there, that's been that little triangle up in the north has been a little bit of a problem over time, but we've come up with a concession renter there that's going to have cell tower and use that little piece of the park, and we're planning on just leaving that as it sits today. If we implement this master plan, we can push some of the components down a little bit to the south, so that would open up that northern area of the park for parking. As I talked about, we'd have this through way, so we'd have more parking up along that northern part. We're also there is also a small parking area down here on the south that's part of the park. If you know where the tunnel is that goes underneath the freeway, it's right here. This is currently just a little parking lot, kind of an overflow parking lot. It's used from time to time when the park is busy. What we're proposing to do is to take those amenities, those 2 buildings, the garage and the train building, and to put them in that space, create a little parking space. We would take a few of the parking spaces that are there to do that. So it would become this little center where we'd have maintenance and operations, and the train folks would move into that space. That would give us that upper space up in the top part of the park, so that we could implement this new parking facility. The on-site existing parking today is 35 spaces. And what we're proposing is to add 26 new spaces through this new scheme. And so we would have 61 spaces at the park to accommodate the new building and some of the new facilities that we're proposing here. So the structures and the buildings that we're looking at on the park, I probably should first say there is an existing restroom there that's in somewhat disrepair. We're planning on removing that. That's where that A6 number is approximately located. So we would be taking that restroom out. We'd be putting in two restrooms. One is a part of the community center building. It would have exterior access for the patrons, so that it wouldn't necessarily be only open when the community building is open. but there would be a restroom in that building up here, and there would also be a second restroom. We're proposing a small restroom over here because this is where we have most of our group gatherings, some larger picnic structures here and here, and then we have lots of smaller picnic tables scattered, and we seem to get a lot of use in that treed and meadow kind of area that runs through this part of the park. So we'd be looking at servicing those through these picnic shelters and also the restroom buildings. Again, down at the bottom here, at this existing parking lot, we're looking at relocating those two buildings that were up in the farthest north part of the park. And we're planning on some other kinds of shade structures in different areas, small and large, to accommodate single picnic tables or small groupings of picnic tables, and perhaps to improve the shade where the tennis players are in between the courts. So we're proposing those two things. By pushing apart the courts, which is a big deal, and we really went around and around on that because there is some expense, but we felt it was it helped the overall design in making this park much more focused on this central area, which when we push the play space up into the park, we end up with a really nice central core area that will be the kind of where you would go if you were going to this park. We have the two play lots for the youngest kids, and then the grade school age kids, which would be here and here across the center of the park. We'd have some open grass play areas, play spaces, so that if you were watching younger kids, you would be able to keep them corralled in this central part of the park. And then just to the north of that, we're looking at a spray splash pad. It would replace the wading the wading pool that requires a lifeguard, and this would be on surface, play in the sprayed water. We'll put in a recycled system, and that would be something I think that we heard. We got a lot of feedback that the water was a wanted element, and this seemed like the most appropriate manifestation of that. Some of the other features we're looking at: active play. We want people to get out there, and health and exercise was a part of the original program. Along the bottom of the park, what we're looking at is when we move the play area up, we'll be able to put in exercise stations. When I show you the walkway system, you'll see how that ties in. But we're looking at 12-station exercise equipment, so that cardio, fitness, those kinds of things could happen in that space there. We're looking at the 4 new tennis courts that would replace the courts that we would be taking out. We're looking at 2 new half-court basketball courts that would be striped, overlaid for paddleball courts, because we heard a lot of people pickleball. Because we heard a lot of people would want to play pickleball at this park. We're also looking at improving the soccer field by putting in an artificial surface so that we can take care of that. Because it would be a major expense, we would fence that in. We're also looking at some lights for that facility, lights at the tennis courts, and just some general lighting in amongst the walkway system so that the park could be used in the evening time. The pickleball and the basketball courts, we're not proposing lights on at this point. So the circulation system, one of the things we heard was that there was, it was difficult to walk across or through the park because there's not these interconnected walkways. What we're proposing is a perimeter walkway around this park by pushing the tennis courts over and by putting that parking space across the back. We're going to be able to have a major walkway system all the way around the park. We're thinking about 8-foot wide paved path. It'd be almost a third of a mile long. It would circulate the whole whole of the park, so that if you wanted to do laps or if you just wanted to go from one place to the other, you'd be able to do that around the perimeter of the park and make sure we keep people off the streets. Then we would have a series of walkways within the park. Some of them would be decomposed granite. Some of them would be just smaller walkways to allow people to access the different picnic tables and different picnic areas. And I think we'd have just a really nice walk system so that you could choreograph your own walk through the park if you wanted, or around the perimeter to get exercise, or just to be out in amongst the nature of the park. We're also talking about some landscape improvements when we do park design. Over the last few years, we've really been pushing for areas that are not used areas that aren't being used for sports or for open running and play. We want to take the manicured turf grass out of those areas, and we want to push that into places where we would use it, both for drought, maintenance, all kinds of other kinds of issues, but also gives us the opportunity to do some water quality gardens, those kinds of things, rain gardens, collect some water, do those kinds of things. And so we'd like to do that along Patterson. We'd like to do that along Killingworth to kind of change the landscape there from a turf grass-based landscape to a drought-tolerant garden facility. We also have some opportunities for art in those places, and so those would run pretty much specifically along Patterson and Killingworth, but we would be looking for other parts of the park where we could take out some turf grass where it wouldn't affect the play or the use as it sits there. Another thing, we walked the park with the community, and we talked about the condition of the trees. There's some beautiful big trees there. There's some overplanting of some trees, so there's some competition between trees. There's some trees that are in a bit of decline. We talked about the urban forest and how we're going to try to manage that. All of those trees were probably planted in the same year. We want to try to make sure that we're taking out trees and putting in new trees as a urban forest management system, so that we'll have trees of different ages and different groupings. So what we're looking at is probably taking out a few trees. We'll probably have to take out quite a few trees to get the development in, but then over time we'd be looking at the trees that are in decline, taking those out, replacing those again as a part of an urban management plan. With that, I'd be happy to go back over any of the slides, talk about any of the amenities that we're trying to put in the park. The planning process, again, was pretty nice, pretty extensive. We got a lot of feedback. I think you're going to hear some more today. I do a lot of planning, a lot of park planning across Southern California, and it's always great when we get this kind of participation in our parks.
Thank you, Mr. Volz. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I had a couple of quick questions. The tennis courts you're going to move, were those resurfaced recently?
Yes, they were.
So that's sort of lost money.
We did ponder the pluses and minuses for a long time on those. We're looking at implementation in a few years. By the time we get out there and start demoing, we don't know what the funding's going to be like. We don't know how the phasing is going to go. But we definitely will take that into consideration. We did spend some money there recently.
And picnic tables, is there going to be a net gain or a net loss?
I think we'll have a net gain of picnic tables over that
Parks
site.
always seem to have a shortage of picnic tables for people playing backgammon and just eating, so if there's more, the merrier.
There's a lot of picnic tables right now, but people do come into this park and bring new tables for their group events, and so I think we're going to try to accommodate that.
Are they just grouped under these shelters, or there's going to be some random single ones?
Lots of single ones, as well as some big group areas.
Good. I like it by and large.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Everything seems very well. I have a question about the basketball court. Is it half court?
Two half courts. We seem to find that works best on our park sites here. If we were going to build a number of courts, we probably would have built conventional courts. But the half court seems to get the kind of play that we want in this. We're not doing organized basketball here. This is come and play. So we're doing two half-court basketball courts. You wouldn't be running a full-court game here the way we have it laid out.
Will it be back-to-back?
Back-to-back.
Okay. And there's no lighting, you said?
We're not proposing lighting on that back area there.
Is there a reason for that?
Not really.
President Wu, Commissioner Kalfayan, we typically do not recommend lit basketball courts. In deference to the neighborhoods, we actually try to, as counterintuitive as it may sound, try to deter nighttime play because of the noise element and the crowds. And so in deference to neighbors, we typically don't light our basketball courts unless it's ambient lighting that's part of the overall park, but not enough to have a legitimate basketball game.
I can see your point, but this basketball court is right in the middle of the park. I don't think will be a noise problem for the neighbors. It's not going to bother disturb the neighbors.
It is
possible.
It is in the back, but we do have apartments on Killingsworth. But yes, it's far. This is about as far as you can get from all the folks.
Yeah, it's a good location. I like the location, but if we can consider to put some lights, I would appreciate that.
Again, we talked about the picnic tables, the shade structures. I assume there's a net gain as well.
Yes. We don't have enough shade out there. I mean, there's lots of trees, but we don't have any actual, we don't have enough shade over the spaces. So we have 2 large group picnic spaces that will be solid roofed. And then we have other places where we're going to do some shade fabric and those kinds of things over both individual tables and maybe smaller groups of tables.
What is there now?
Right now, there's a picnic shelter. There's a number of places on the park site that have strings of picnic tables that are kind of in the open grass and under the trees. The favorite area is kind of to the west along Patterson there. But there's also other places that seem to be used a lot. I think, and there's some sinks and some other kinds of facilities out there, and we'd be replacing most of that.
What would be the cost difference if it was a multi-use field versus just a soccer field?
What would be the cost?
Yeah, is there a significant cost difference to that?
Not on the synthetic turf field. We can, if you perhaps want to use it for some other kinds of uses, we could stripe it into the turf grass. We sew those lines in, or we can even paint them if you have a special event or something like that. This field is a U10 size, if you're familiar with soccer, so that's about the 10-year-old, 12-year-old. But we also play 7-on-7 soccer there, and small-sided soccer for larger kids and young adults. But it's not a football-sized field. It's about a half the size of a football.
Baseball wouldn't work either.
What's that?
Baseball wouldn't work either.
It wouldn't. It's really. It's just not very big. Yeah. T-ball.
Commissioner Astarian, if I may, when we refer to multi-use fields, we're usually referring to a large baseball field where the outfield could be used for soccer when it's not being used for baseball. And it's hard to do that unless they're really little kids with rubber cleats. It's hard to do that unless it's an artificial turf field. That's why one of our recommendations would be to look at our large baseball diamonds that have large outfields to see if we can convert those to artificial turf so we can use them for both sports, which would be one way of addressing the demand for soccer and doing it cost effectively. President Wu, before we go any further, in the interest of time, you might want to limit public comments to 2 minutes each, and then that would allow you more time for some question and answers after you receive comments.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Volz.
Thank you.
So moving right along.
Commissioner Sharkey.
Right now? Moving right along, so for item 6B, we have 7 speaker cards. So the first speaker will be Mr. Lee Steven. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Lee Steven.
It's Ms.
And then
okay, so
followed
I've
by
got 2
Mr.
minutes
Stephen
here.
Meek.
I'm an RN from Glendale Adventist Medical Center, and I've been so pleased that I was able to find pickleball to play because I have decreased mobility issues, and it's something that people who cannot move as quickly or as far can play. So it's wonderful And I'm not the only one who's in our group who has those kind of issues. And this is a really great design. There's lots of good things about it. But I'm going to make some more suggestions. We appreciate your efforts to provide us with pickleball courts, and we see that you have allocated 2 unlighted multi-use pickleball courts. We regret that these courts, if they are intended for our group, they're not going to be that useful to us, and that's because a lot of our people work, and so it's too late in the evening for them to be able to play. It's too dark. It's only in the summer we'll be able to use them. We already have 3 multi-use pickleball courts at Pacific Park, and we can't use them all year round. And we really would love to have something that we can use all year. As you can see, we do have some pickleball players present. Not that many this time, I guess, in comparison to what we have had. And we've got all the way to the back, we've got some pickleball players. And some star pickleball players, too. And, okay, in both the meetings, we asked and insisted for the dedicated lighting pickleball courts, and we're wondering why it's not included. And I heard that it's due to noise and whatever, but as it's been pointed out, that the noise is in a place where it's not going to be that loud. And I will say that when you mentioned the bit about them having problems in certain areas, other parks that we've gone into where there's been homeless people sleeping there, that they no longer sleep in those parks because we're there playing. They found other places to go to, so it's made it safer for the community. So if you could not provide us with these ones being lighted at this point, could we overstripe a couple of the tennis ball courts, or even one of them, because one tennis court will give us 4 pickleball courts, and that, you know, and we're a fairly large group now playing, so that'd be helpful. And we are also willing to pay for the use of the courts just like the tennis players do. We want to thank you for your efforts and hope that you're able to provide us with dedicated lighted pickleball courts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Stephen.
Can I suggest something, not to you, for the pickleball speakers? We hear you, we know what you want, and we will consider it to save some time. Is that acceptable? We will hear you. I know your problem is the lighting at this time, and we know about it.
Dedicated courts.
What else you need?
Dedicated courts.
Dedicated courts, because they're...
That will be in the future. Yeah, we will consider it in the future. At this time, we will focus on your lighting.
President Wu, members of the commission, if I may make a recommendation, the people who submitted cards, if they're all speaking on pickleball item, they can allocate their time to one speaker so that one person can detail all their points, if you wish.
We have 6 more speaker cards. So they're all, the remaining.
I'll yield to Rusty. I'll yield.
In your name, sir?
Ken Robbins. I gotta get 5 minutes. Now you're up to 4. I yield to Rusty Marshall Pure.
Anyone else?
Gene Sears also.
Anyone else?
And that leaves me with Mr. Stephen Meek, Mr. Rusty Howes, and Mr. James Hill. So, Mr. Stephen Meek, would you like to speak, sir?
Hello again. Thank you. I love your design. I am so glad you put in the walking path. I've been using the park for over a decade now. And in the mornings, there are not hundreds, but many, many people doing that walk. And right now, they're having to walk in the street for half of it. So that is a wonderful improvement. I really like the addition of possible art in the park. And I would urge you to take your time and find some good art to put in there. Don't just rush something in there, because it could be a great focal point. I don't personally play pickleball, but I don't mind at all. I think it would be great to I'm going to call it court number 5, which is the one closest to the community center, make that 4 pickleball courts. I know the first 4 are used for classes all the time, so those 4 courts are always busy. And that would leave 3 more that could be used during the day and the evening, and those have lights, so we could share them for that. I did want to thank Jess and David for doing these meetings and getting the input from everybody on these parks. It is really a great park that we have here, and if we could expand it, the only thing I would recommend is along the Verdugo Wash, which is the the top of the thing. It seems that the city already owns land going from the park all the way to, I think it's called Fairmont, where there's a building that the city owns that has no parking or anything anymore, and it's just an empty building. That would help connect the park and the city to the river walks, getting you a lot further along without having to go through the neighborhoods for pedestrians and bicycles. As an example, you could go from the new condos on Central over to this park and then take the bicycle pedestrian path along the Verdugo Wash all the way to Fairmont, and then just you still have to get across San Fernando to get over to the Riverwalk, but it would be a lot more convenient if we could manage to do that and include that into our strategic planning in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Meade.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Rusty Howells.
I'm sorry, is this the person who's going to be speaking
I'm the
longer?
Rusty House guy.
So he's the Rusty, and then we have Mr. James Hill.
So since we've knocked down so many, can I get 5 instead of 2?
Mr. President?
So yeah, we did ask the audience, and they did go and allocate their time to Mr.
So 5 minutes?
So, Mr. Howell, if you don't mind, maybe consolidating it to 5, would that be possible?
Yeah,
sir?
I will be as concise as possible.
Great. Thank you, sir. 5 minutes, please.
Do we have a buzzer?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
All right. So first of all, Mr. Duran and Commissioners, thank you so much. I recognize I've been a citizen for 23 years. My wife, my kids are growing up here. I love Glendale. I'm super excited about this. We've used all the facilities in the community. This is exciting. In the last few years, I've become heavily involved in pickleball, and I just want to go over a few key points. I think our goals are the same. Forget pickleball for a second. As a residents, to maximize our spend, to make sure we leverage our resources and save money. My main concern is there's an opportunity for the city to do great things and potentially miss out and lose some money in the process by having to do upgrades. So specifically, I want to go through a few things. I also happen to be involved nationally in the pickleball industry, and so I've seen an explosion across the country, and I've seen cities of smaller sizes have great gains. We can get into the specifics. I'm happy to have conversations later, but what I want you to remember is that there's statistics nationally, and our city is right in the area where we can benefit from that, and some of those haven't really been discussed in detail. But as we go through, pickleball is exploding. Most recently in Southern California, Manhattan Beach, Tustin, 8 courts, 14 courts in Tustin. So you have cities of smaller size than ours that are consistently going. This afternoon I had a conversation with Mr. Gale, who's the Director of Recreation from the city of Simi Valley, and he actually had said he's happy to be a resource to have conversations with you guys. He couldn't be here today, but they as a city had underplanned, and they found they now have 24 pickleball courts in the community. We're not asking for 24, but what I would hate to see is, as you've talked about with the first measure, we have the $16 million, what are we going to do? There's going to be money that's spent. Let's spend it in such a way that in a year from the build, we're not like, oh, crud, we should have done this or paint that. Even if it's $5,000, why waste it? So one thing people have talked about is numbers. You have 4 pickleball courts can fit on 1 tennis court. So if we maximize all these courts, you have a ratio of basically 4 people per 4 times 4, 16, right? Or 4 times 8, 24. On 1 pickleball court, because the games are much shorter, on 1 tennis court, 4 pickleball courts, you have 32 people playing in the same area. So if you do the math purely from a real estate land space, you have the opportunity to reach 64 or more citizens, depending upon how it ranks. That can be reached by doing multi-line courts on some of the tennis courts. You can have dedicated times. We can give you examples if you want. The mayor of Las Vegas, quotes from him, mayors of Cathedral City. Over and over, there's opportunities where city planners and mayors and councils have found a great leveraging of resources and maximizing citizens' opportunities. female who had to leave with a mom. One of the unique things about pickleball is you have a phenomenally diverse age of. So I'm not the typical thing when people think pickleball, but you have 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-years-olds, certainly a higher percentage of boomers and seniors. But there's a rapid explosion. Christine is one of the top players in the country. She happened to recently move. Her and her husband, Dr. McGrath, moved to Pasadena. The owner of the largest paddle company in the pickleball industry is now in Southern California, and some of them have tried to find time to play at Pacific Park recently. So I know the city is planning on working with young adults as well, young professionals coming in. So there's a rapid increase to that. If we look a few years out from when this build is, I would hate to have us be at a point where we're seeing these people drive away from Glendale to go to Simi Valley, to go to even Pasadena as they're putting in some lines. Let's have an opportunity to keep those young professionals. And then the last part of revenue. If you have more play using those courts, you have revenue to the park. But then if you have lots of people driving in from other communities, which they already are, Attorney Paul Leaf is driving up from downtown Glendale on a regular basis to play. And so you have slight revenue, but it is still revenue maximizing the resources. With that said, lights, yes. If you say we're not going to do this or that and all there is those two courts, it would be extremely wise to have lights there. There's hardcore statistics across the country where pickleball play in parks decreases crime, elevates the care. Pickleball communities actually raise money for Parks and Rec. So you pretty much have a guarantee that if you have a thriving element like that, the pickleball communities will do fundraisers and they'll bring additional revenue. If you want, I can give you more resources and information about those parks and those development projects that have been done. We're not here asking for a handout. We just don't want you guys to waste money. We want you to maximize what the city can do, and we can be a part of you guys doing great things together. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, sorry, 28 seconds. If this all fails, DIF, it's related. The lights in Pacific Park, those are great courts, fantastic. We would encourage modifying those lights to have lighted courts there. Again, we can control crime, and there will be dedicated time for the pickleball players. 12 seconds under. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I have a quick question. Are you only asking for the tennis court multi-striped? You're not asking for exclusive pickleball, but multi-striped?
So obviously, a dream come true, dedicated courts would be great. But in many, many, many cities across the country, there's subtle ways where you can add additional lines. Actually, the professional USTA has measures in place to have subtle lines, as they call them, that keep these registered for tournament play. These aren't used for tournament play anyway, but lines can be used, and then you allow the pickleball groups and the tennis groups with scheduled times periodically to share those courts. So up at Shoal Canyon, for example, they'll have 10 courts up there. On Wednesday night, sometimes you'll have one tennis court, and you'll have 30-some pickleball players rotating in through that one tennis court. So yes, without any additional construction, literally only paint, you could add a lot of opportunity to really maximize those existing tennis courts.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The last speaker will be Mr. James Hill.
I live at 667 Patterson, which is at the southwest corner. I live on the corner of Graydale and Patterson. We've lived there for 18 years. Been a resident of Glendale for over 23 years. The effort by the Parks Department to incorporate the community in the planning and the meetings we had, excellent. The follow-up by, I'm going to probably get her name, Iris, of her emails and continued information letting us know what's going on, very much appreciated. A couple things that myself and the neighbors are looking at as living right at the park is the parking situation. Even though we're adding all in the park, the soccer field is a big kind of controversy in the neighborhood by some of the residents. If that's going to be open park's open till 10 o'clock at night. If that's going to be lit and open till 10 o'clock, you're going to have all those people parking. And they're not going to park in the back. They're going to park on Patterson and Kenilworth. And the parking there is already horrific. So when people come home, the people that live here, when we come home, there's no parking spots. And it's been suggested about permit parking, but permit parking will not take effect until 10 o'clock. So we're not going to be able to come home and park in front of our houses with the soccer field. That's one of the concerns, big concerns of people, and I believe Iris has received stuff from a couple of other neighbors that can't be here, so I'm kind of speaking on their behalf. One of the big issues that was addressed, my always concern, was the walkways. And people, if you ever go by there, everybody's walking in the street. So you're walking in the street, that's been addressed. It was addressed or suggested that I'll be able to drive around the park, that it was only going to be one way, that you could drive on Graydale up to the corner, and the rest was, now it's going to be able to have a circle drive, and that's going to be traffic for people that live around there.
Okay, Mr. Hill, I'm sorry, but your time is up, so if you could just wrap it up in the next 10 seconds.
Okay. With the pickleball, I believe we need to have those lit. I've never played it, but I see the use of it. And the requirement that we kept 8 tennis courts at this to possibly eliminate one of the tennis courts and dedicate that to the pickleball or the basketball courts.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thank you.
President Wu, if I may,
Yes,
we
please.
did receive one email from a resident, and I just want to kind of bring that to your attention. And for the record, it was from Dan Sternow, and he is a resident that lives across from the existing playground, and he expressed similar concerns with traffic, noise, and lighting. And he did mention that he does like some of the features like the sidewalks and the perimeter, the walking paths, and the playground being moved, but he also shared concerns with the traffic and the soccer field with noise and lighting, just for the record.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if I may, because I think we're running out of time, I think what I speak to for the commission, I think we need to look into having alternate striping for 1 or 2 tennis courts for pickleball, an allocated time for them. Does that something, and have them light?
Tennis courts are busy, and it's been rented, I think.
President Wu, commissioners, we will reconsider the lighting of the 2 half courts, and maybe it's not a bad idea that if we're going to light those 2 half court basketball courts, that later in the evenings, instead of being reserved for basketball, they're reserved for pickleball. We have you may or may not know, we have a contract with a concessionaire that runs the tennis courts. They manage the courts, they give lessons, and they rent them out. They're under a 3-year contract. They're towards the end of their first year. We can talk to them to see what the potential is of them reserving a court for pickleball, and the tennis courts are lit. So there's that potential, and that would just be a matter of programming. The cost would probably be less than $5,000 to retrofit those courts for pickleball to be shared with a tennis court. So we can commit to doing those 2 things.
And since they're willing to pay, I mean, to the concessionaire, hopefully it's half a dozen or 6 the other. And my other comment is on the parking. I mean, there's no rule that it has to be only after 10 p.m. I mean, if parking continues to be an issue, there can be permit parking after 4 p.m. at whatever time of the day people think have residential permit parking on one side of the street. If that
will be a different issue. I don't think we should.
I mean, it's not this commission, but
well, to clarify, will the soccer field be lit?
The soccer field is proposed to be lit. The soccer field will be programmed by our department, so it will be managed. It will be fenced, so when it's not reserved or permitted, it will be locked. It will be lit. We don't have to have the soccer activity go until 10. We can close it at 9. Coco and I were talking earlier. There might be an opportunity to add a few more parking spaces once we go from here to the actual final plan and final design. There are a few opportunities that we were talking about, so we will also commit to trying to add more parking when we can as this plan continues to evolve. So we could commit to those 2 things. as it relates to the soccer field. The thing about the soccer field in that location is there are rogue soccer games already. So by formally designating that as a soccer field and artificial turf, there won't be any road games. It won't be all dirt and the dust. Yes, it will allow people to play till later in the evening, but overall, we think it would be more of a community benefit than having the downside to it. But we will see if we can add more parking spaces than what's in this current first blush of the master plan.
Will the tennis courts be lit?
Yes, tennis courts are currently lit. And
So
will
both
remain.
tennis courts will be lit?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and that just occurred to me too. Since those courts are lit till 10, how much more is it to light the basketball courts? Yeah, except that it's a different clientele that play tennis than basketball till late at night. But the pickleball community, if they're using the basketball courts till late at night, maybe that's an improvement, and that changes things slightly. So we'll look at that.
Right. So, we have a motion?
I move we adopt the plan with the recommendations about possibly using some tennis courts for pickleball and lighting the basketball courts. And if more parking can be found, so be it.
Okay. So I'll second it.
Okay, Commissioners Asatrian,
Yes.
Quad,
Yes.
Afayan,
Yes.
Yes.
Michaels, President Wu.
Yes. Being that we have another meeting scheduled for this room, are we going to...
Have to leave.
Yes, there's going to be another meeting after hours. They graciously gave us a little bit more time to wrap things up.
Okay.
I
Should we
think
continue?
maybe the director might have a recommendation.
President Wu, it's probably not a bad thing to go ahead and carry over the suspension policy agenda item to next meeting. The next meeting would be scheduled for December 14th. Hopefully you are all available. And I say that because we really do want you to take some time to read through the report and understand as clearly as you can what it is that we are talking about. But very briefly, just to set the stage, Iris, do you need to read the item into the agenda in order for me to talk about it?
Or at least say what the item number is. So 6C1 is what we're talking about.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and read it into the record?
Sure. So 6C1 is suspension policy, motion to review and approve CSP's revised suspension policy titled Enforcement of Rules and Regulations and provide feedback on CSP's rules and regulations.
Okay. Yeah, so staff recommends that we carry this over to a December 14th meeting. But just to set the stage, one of the fundamental responsibilities of our department is park safety and security, including safety and security to the immediate neighbors to all of our parks and including park property. And of course, we rely on the police department to assist us in keeping the park safe and secure, and especially during night and non-regular work hours. And one of the tools that we use to help ensure this is a suspension policy, which is an administrative policy. So we are proposing an updated suspension policy with an additional tool that would give us the leverage that we need to do a better job of keeping our parks secure. And the gist of that is a procedure by which any staff member and police officer can issue an immediate 30-day suspension notice to any individual that is breaking the park rules. And so we have 6 levels of violation, and depending on the level of the violation, we would be able to give an immediate 30-day suspension letter, which will ban these individuals from the park and all of the city's parks, not just the park where they are violating the rule or engaging in a particular behavior. So that is the crux of what this updated suspension policy is. Right now, we don't have the ability to do that. But typically what happens now is 11:30 at night, there are individuals in the park, they're smoking, they might be drinking, being loud and boisterous. The police department are on their patrols. They go up to this group, they will issue citations, and then they drive off. The group leaves the park. They may come back after the police have left, or they'll be back the next day, or they'll go to the next park. So this will be a way to address that. When we give you this report, we will have a representative from the police department and a representative from the city attorney's office, and so they will help us articulate what this new suspension policy is. So it's a new tool. It's something we think we need now, and so we will, if it's okay with the commission, we will go ahead and make this report on December 14th and ask for your consideration to approve a motion for us to implement this policy. And as well, we have the informational reports. My recommendation is that we defer those also until the December 14th meeting. So the suspension policy will be the only action item on December 14th, and we can spend adequate time on it.
Thank you. The request of Director Duran will go ahead and carry over the action item of the suspension policy and then reports to our December meeting that will allow us to adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned.